Okay.
So serious. Did you put snacks in?
Yeah.
You guys want to get out here and hit some? Hit it hard. We're here.
So, Caitlin Clark is playing golf again. She is playing in, she played in another Pro-Am, and as expected, you know, Caitlin Clark golf is the most relevant thing in women's basketball.
You got it, continue to work the camera back.
Caitlin Clark walked into the RSM Classic expecting nothing more than a fun break from her regular routine, a chance to swing a few clubs, laugh with fans, and enjoy a sport she genuinely loves. But the moment she stepped onto the course, it became clear she wasn't just another celebrity guest showing up for a photo op. People started gathering around her group before she even took her first swing. Phones were out, whispers spread, and within minutes, she became the most watched athlete on the entire course. And then came the shots. Clean, confident, and shockingly powerful for someone who doesn't play golf for a living. When she sent a 270-yard drive soaring down the fairway, the crowd erupted like they were courtside watching one of her deep threes. Golf fans couldn't believe what they were seeing an athlete from a completely different sport stepping in and swinging with the fluidity of someone who'd been playing her whole life. Clips of her drives, her focus, even her smile between holes went viral before she finished the round. But it wasn't just fans who noticed. Zach Johnson, a Ryder Cup captain who has watched the best athletes in the world up close, praised her competitive instinct and her calm presence under pressure. PGA Commissioner Jay Monahan couldn't stop talking about her poise and natural talent. Experienced golfers were quietly impressed by how quickly she shook off mistakes like her opening shot into the water, resetting herself with the same cold confidence she shows at the free throw line. It was one of those rare moments when two different sports collide and instantly click. Golfers embraced her. Fans adored her. Media outlets couldn't look away. But while golf embraced her, another world stayed strangely quiet. As Caitlin's performance at the RSM Classic started lighting up social media, most people assumed her own league would jump in immediately. A simple congratulations post, a highlight clip, maybe even a shout-out celebrating one of their brightest young stars stepping into a new arena and absolutely thriving. But instead, nothing. Not a tweet, not a story, not a single line acknowledging what the rest of the sports world was buzzing about. For hours, fans waited for the WNBA's official accounts to say something, anything. They refreshed the feed thinking maybe the social team was behind, or maybe the post was cued. But the silence stretched on, and the longer it lasted, the more deafening it became. This wasn't a situation where the league simply missed a moment. It was a conscious choice. A full blackout on one of the biggest stories connected to any WNBA player that week. People started noticing patterns. The league had previously highlighted far smaller crossover moments from other players' podcast appearances, small sponsorship announcements, even birthday posts. But Caitlin showing up at one of golf's biggest events and becoming the star attraction. Not a word. It felt deliberate, like someone decided the spotlight she was getting outside basketball was too bright, too fast, or too off-brand for the narrative the league wanted to protect. And this didn't come out of nowhere. For months, Caitlin's rise had quietly created fractures whispers that she received too much attention complaints from players who felt overshadowed tension between longtime veterans and a rookie who became the face of the league overnight. The silence at the RSM Classic wasn't just a missing tweet. It was a public reminder that beneath the WNBA's polished exterior, there were unresolved feelings simmering under the surface. And fans felt it immediately. And that's when the subtle shots started appearing. Once the silence settled, the next wave hit, and it came from inside the league. Subtweets began popping up from accounts connected to WNBA players, and even though no names were mentioned, everyone knew exactly who they were talking about. Short, pointed messages like "stay in your lane," or "funny how some people get all this attention for doing the bare minimum." They weren't subtle. They weren't vague. They were aimed straight at Caitlin. Then, one player went a step further, publicly downplaying her entire performance at the RSM Classic. She posted that golf fans were overhyping mediocrity and insisted Caitlin wasn't even that good. It wasn't just shade, it was frustration wrapped in sarcasm, thrown directly into a moment where Caitlin should have been celebrated. And that's when the debate ignited across social media. Was this jealousy? Or was it genuine irritation from players who felt overshadowed? Fans were split. Supporters pointed out that Caitlin was boosting the visibility of the entire league, bringing in audiences who'd never watched women's basketball before. But critics argued she was getting opportunities other players had worked for years to earn. It exposed a deeper issue. Some players weren't upset about Caitlin herself. They were upset about the system that suddenly elevated her above everyone else. But regardless of the reason, the pattern was unmistakable. The moment Caitlin stepped into another sport and thrived, the tall poppy syndrome kicked in. The higher she rose, the more certain people tried to chop her down. Not because she failed, but because she succeeded in a space that wasn't hers. The WNBA had long wanted unity, but Caitlin's rapid rise revealed just how divided things had quietly become. Yet while some tried to minimize her success, something very different was happening outside the league, something no one expected. Meanwhile, in the world she wasn't even supposed to dominate. While parts of the WNBA were busy side-eyeing Caitlin's unexpected moment in the spotlight, the golf world was doing the exact opposite. They weren't just impressed, they were all in. Zach Johnson, a Ryder Cup icon who has spent decades watching the greatest competitors in the sport, spoke about her with a kind of admiration usually reserved for rising PGA stars. He called her rare, praising not just the power in her swing, but the humility she carried between shots. To him, it wasn't the 270-yard drives that stood out, it was the way she handled pressure, like she'd been competing in pro tournaments for years. Then came Jay Monahan. The PGA commissioner didn't just compliment her, he used a word almost never thrown around lightly in golf circles: transcendent. He said Caitlin had something beyond talent, a presence that connected people, a competitive spark that pulled in casual fans, and a natural charisma that made every moment around her feel like an event. In a sport where personality is often as important as performance, she had both effortlessly. LPGA players chimed in too. Some even joked that they wanted to recruit her. Others said they'd love to see her back on the course, praising her poise, her mindset, and the way she seemed to fit in instantly with the rhythm of professional golf. To them, she wasn't an outsider dipping her toes into their world. She looked like someone who could compete, evolve, and genuinely belong. And the fans, they treated her like a phenomenon. Families followed her from hole to hole. Golf commentators talked about her like she was the story of the week. Even people who had never watched a WNBA game suddenly found themselves Googling her stats, watching fever highlights, and asking questions about the league she came from. It was a marketing dream, an organic crossover that brought fresh eyes straight to women's basketball. But the irony, the one organization that stood to benefit most from this exposure wanted nothing to do with it. But inside the WNBA, the reaction wasn't admiration, it was fear. Caitlin Clark's sudden explosion onto the golf scene wasn't just another highlight reel moment, it exposed something the WNBA had been quietly struggling with for years. Her popularity didn't grow slowly, gradually, or predictably. It skyrocketed. One tournament, one weekend, one viral clip, and suddenly an entirely different sport was celebrating her more loudly than the league she plays for full time. And that contrast hit a nerve. For veteran players who had spent a decade grinding for attention, endorsements, and recognition, Caitlin's rapid rise felt like a reminder of everything the league hadn't been able to do for them. They had watched their own breakout moments fade in a matter of days, sometimes hours. Meanwhile, Caitlin's name didn't just trend. It lived on timelines, comment sections, debate shows, and even in households that had never watched a women's basketball game. It wasn't just fame, it was momentum they had never experienced even at their peak. Her success forced a hard conversation. Why did one rookie become the face of the league overnight, while players who had carried it for years struggled to get even a fraction of the spotlight? The uncomfortable answer pointed back at the league itself. Marketing missteps, missed opportunities, a system that never built a star pipeline strong enough to match the moment. Caitlin simply revealed the gap, the distance between what the league wished it was and what it actually managed to promote. And her crossover appeal only amplified that gap. She drew in families, young girls, golf dads, and entire audiences who didn't follow women's basketball at all. She didn't just grow her fan base, she grew the league's visibility without the league lifting a finger. That made her invaluable, and to some intimidating. For players who had been fighting for relevance for years, it felt like being overshadowed again, only this time by someone who wasn't even trying to outshine them. Caitlin's rise wasn't malicious, but it was undeniable, and that quiet tension simmering just below the surface was about to erupt in a very public way. And then one comment turned quiet tension into open conflict. The tension had been building slowly, almost quietly, until one press conference turned it into a full-on wildfire. Reporters asked a well-known WNBA veteran about Caitlin's performance at the RSM Classic, an easy opportunity to show unity, crack a light-hearted joke, or at least toss a polite compliment her way. Instead, the player leaned back in her chair, rolled her eyes, and delivered the line that would split the fan base in half: "Golf won't fill our seats." The room went silent. Reporters exchanged glances. It wasn't subtle, and it definitely wasn't neutral. It was a public dismissal, a clear statement that Caitlin's success didn't matter. Or worse, that it was somehow a distraction from the real work happening in the league. Within minutes, the clip hit social media, and the reaction was immediate. Fans were furious. People accused the player of insecurity, jealousy, and bitterness. Comments poured in: "Why tear down your own teammate's peer? Why not support someone bringing attention to the league? Caitlin's filling more seats than anyone right now. What are you talking about?" The backlash was overwhelming, and it didn't fade overnight. It turned into a full conversation about why the WNBA seemed so resistant to celebrating one of its biggest draws. Instead of shrinking the moment, the comment magnified everything Caitlin had been dealing with. The eye roll became a symbol of a deeper divide between players trying to protect the culture they built over years and a new superstar who unintentionally challenged it by simply being herself. Caitlin wasn't asking for special treatment. She wasn't campaigning for attention. She was just playing golf. Yet somehow her enjoyment of another sport became a threat to the league's comfort zone. By the end of the week, the narrative had shifted entirely. It wasn't about her golf swing anymore. It was about why someone succeeding outside of basketball could cause this much resentment inside it. Fans saw it clearly. Critics amplified it. And Caitlin, she noticed the noise, but she didn't let it define her. But Caitlin's response wasn't anger. It was something else entirely. While the noise around her kept getting louder, Caitlin Clark responded with something no critic expected: calm, steady grace. She never fired back, never shaded anyone, never fed the drama. Instead, every interview she gave during the RSM Classic circled back to the same simple truth: she was there to have fun. She described golf as her escape, a mental reset she genuinely enjoyed, and a personal challenge that let her compete without the weight of expectations she carries in basketball. It wasn't a PR line. It was honest, and people felt that. When asked about the criticism circulating online, she didn't bite. She smiled, brushed it off, and talked about how grateful she was for the chance to play alongside legends, meet fans, and learn a game she wants to get better at. There were no digs, no defensive comments, just humility. That alone flipped the conversation. While some players looked tense and irritated in press conferences, Caitlin was out there laughing with volunteers, high-fiving kids, and chatting with families waiting along the ropes. And those families, they showed up in waves. Parents brought their daughters to watch her, telling them, "That's the girl who hits those crazy shots in basketball." Golf dads who never watched the WNBA suddenly stood in line for her autograph. Teenagers who only knew her from highlight reels were now asking her about her clubs, her swing, her favorite holes. Caitlin didn't rush them. She talked to every kid. She posed for photos. She carried herself like someone who genuinely enjoyed the moment, not someone trying to survive a PR storm. Her authenticity created a sharp contrast. The more some voices tried to criticize her, the more fans gravitated toward her. The negativity didn't damage her image, it amplified it. People weren't just admiring her athletic ability anymore. They were admiring her character. They saw someone who could take pressure shade and unnecessary drama and still show up with a smile, ready to compete and uplift the people around her. And that's why by the time the final round rolled around, the entire narrative had shifted. By the final round, the real story was impossible to ignore. By the end of the RSM Classic, it became clear that this entire moment wasn't really about golf at all. It was about something much bigger, something the WNBA has struggled to confront for years. Caitlin Clark wasn't just crossing into another sport for fun. She was expanding the reach of women's athletics in ways the league itself had never been able to accomplish. And she was doing it without any coordinated marketing push, without media machinery behind her, and without the league boosting her visibility. Her swing alone brought new viewers. Her attitude brought new supporters. Her name brought new conversations to places women's basketball had never reached. Her crossover impact exposed the uncomfortable truth: the audience she attracted so naturally was the same audience the WNBA had been trying and failing to capture for decades. Entire groups of fans discovered women's basketball through golf clips. Fathers who barely followed the WNBA started replaying her highlights. Families who came for the novelty stayed because they were genuinely impressed. It was organic growth on a scale the league desperately needed, and yet they played no part in it. And that's what made their silence louder. It wasn't just a missed tweet. It was a missed moment, a symbol of deeper cultural issues, resentment towards star power discomfort with rapid success, and fear of one player eclipsing the carefully curated hierarchy the league has tried to maintain. Instead of embracing the unexpected wave of attention Caitlin created, they stepped back and watched from the sidelines, hoping it would calm down instead of blowing up. But while they hesitated, her brand only got bigger. She became a two-sport cultural figure without trying to be one. Her fan base grew wider, younger, and more diverse. She connected with crowds that didn't care about the politics of the league. They cared about her spirit, her skills, and the way she carried herself under pressure. The very backlash meant to shrink her ended up pushing her further into the spotlight. Caitlin Clark isn't waiting for the WNBA's approval anymore. She doesn't need permission to grow to cross boundaries or to become the star fans already believe she is. She isn't waiting for approval anymore. She's leading the way, and the world is following.